Keeping with routine is one of the most important strategies to implement. Predictability is huge for most individuals with disabilities. Predictability brings comfort. Because, like sensory needs, a break in routine can cause a huge level of discomfort. Now, many of us are not big fans of change or transitions. However, in the case of a lot of people with disabilities, change and transitions can actually lead to a very real negative physiological response in the body, which leads to physical discomfort or potential escalation. Because of this, we need to be cognizant of transitions. Transitions, or changing from one activity or setting to another, can be very difficult for many individuals with disabilities. This can be as big of a transition as moving houses during a divorce, or as small of a transition as moving from playtime to storytime in Sunday school. There are proactive strategies that you can put in place to help with transitions. The first is to present schedules ahead of time. This helps make things very predictable and allows everyone to understand the order of the day. Many individuals with disabilities are spatially or visually inclined, so presenting visual schedules can be helpful in providing further support in this area. These visual schedules can be whole class schedules or individual schedules as well, depending on need. Whole class schedules break the day down into chunks to make things predictable for individuals. So, for example, before you start a Sunday school classroom, you may visually go through the day's events, letting everybody know that first we're going to do playtime and follow that by craft time, and then a Bible story, and then music time, and so on and so on. This helps make things very predictable for individuals so they know what's coming first, second, and third. And a great thing about whole group visual schedules is it doesn't just single out the individuals with disabilities who may really need the visual schedule. Instead, it's presented to the entire class, and truth be told, it's beneficial for the entire class to know what's going to happen during the day as well. Some individuals need a more specific, differentiated visual schedule of events, and that's when you'd want to make an individual visual schedule. Individual visual schedules may break tasks down even further. For example, when we talk about story time, a visual schedule may include story time. But before we even get to there, it may also include putting toys away in bins, walking over to the mats, finding a mat and sitting down, and then story time. Breaking things down into more specific steps helps make things even more predictable for individuals, which helps decrease that very real physical discomfort, and also doubles as a way to clearly outline expectations for behavior. Now, for some individuals with disabilities, it may be helpful to prep them ahead of any transition as well. If you know that a transition is coming, then giving them a heads up about it allows them time to process and prepare for the change in activity ahead. Setting a timer to count down the transition can be helpful, as it provides a visual and also lets them know how much time they have with their current activity before they transition to the next one. very predictable. You can also utilize a tool called a first-then board, which is easy to replicate. A first-then board is like a T-chart that specifically shows which activity the individual is going to participate in right now, and which activity is coming up next. So, if it's free play in a Sunday school classroom, then under the first column it might say Legos or Play Legos, and then in the next column it may say Storytime or something similar. That way the child knows that first I'm going to play with Legos, and then I'm going to move to Storytime. Again, very predictable. Once Lego time is over and it's time to move on to Storytime, then you erase and Storytime moves over to the first column, and you'd put whatever comes after Storytime under then, and you'd keep going in that fashion. What you'll also notice from a first-then board is that it models the tried-and-true research-based practice of providing a preferred activity prior to a non-preferred activity, and vice versa. We always want to be cognizant of providing our activities and lessons in the order of preferred activity, non-preferred activity, preferred activity, non-preferred activity. If an individual is working on a preferred activity first, that's great. That's a preferred activity that they're motivated to do. Then if they see a non-preferred activity is going to happen next, that's okay too. Moving back to the idea of prepping ahead of a transition, you can also use a tool called a social story. A social story is a quick story in paragraph form that you write for a specific individual or situation. If it's for an individual, you can even input that person's name in it if you want, but you generally make it for someone who needs expectations of behavior spelled out for them a little bit more. You generally prepare a social story in anticipation of an upcoming transition that hasn't gone well for an individual in the past, but you can also make it on the spot as well. Here's an example of a social story called Moving to Group Time, and I think that as you read it, you'll be able to guess what the struggle was the week before. It is time to clean up and move into our group time. After I clean up my toys, I will walk to the group rug and sit next to Beth with the rest of the kids. I will use my good listening ears during group time, and I will keep my hands to myself. After I do a good job with my friends during group time, I can go back to playing games. Social stories help increase predictability, but also help individuals better understand exactly what is needed of them through their inclusion in the story as well. Social stories are also great to write up in a pinch when there's a sudden, unavoidable change to the schedule and you need to prep someone for it. After prepping ahead of a transition, it can be helpful to coach during the transition as well. So if you're trying to coach somebody from going from playtime to story time, then that might include letting them know, okay, now we're going to stand up. That's great. And we're going to walk over to the rug. Way to go. Very good. And we're going to sit down right here. This coaching can be helpful for a lot of individuals, but not everyone, because keep in mind, this could be considered overly stimulating. Again, everything is differentiated. What some individuals may need could be the exact opposite. Instead of a voice to focus on during these transitions, maybe it's an item to use, a fidget, or an item that they can squeeze in their hand to keep them busy. In all, keeping routine can be vitally important for both our members with and without disabilities. It still allows us to minister, as we can still introduce new things, new activities, new stories. As long as it's all within the familiar routine, not only do we need to love on people with disabilities, but we need to love on them well, and focusing our efforts on providing routine is a great way to do that.